G'day YouTube, warbles on a lot here. Now, I've got to admit that I be dipping into my solar electric refrigerator for a 6.9% alcohol volume 375ml can of Jim Beam bourbon and Coke. Because it's a really funny thing that if you get your head, like between the middle of your nose and your nipples, if you get that irradiated with about 7 lethal doses in, like little areas, 7 of them, you lose a lot of taste buds. And many of your taste buds, they don't come out the other end feeling normal or transmitting normal signals, and therefore, thus and because, I gotta say to you, Cooper's beer, it doesn't taste normal. It doesn't taste right. But by the mysteries of radiation oncology, if you get 87% of a lethal dose of radiation between, like here and here, yeah, bourbon still tastes good. And therefore, thus and because, whereas I used to be a Cooper's drunker, now I be a bourbon drunker. And today, after a lot of time thinking about it, working up to it, after having one can of 15% before 3 cans of 6.9, and now I'm on the 4th can of 6.9, yeah, you can think of thus as being, quote, a malt liquor video. I'm pretty pissed. And what I wish to discuss, to actually present a monologue thereupon, is the topic of recognition, treaty, voice, and rent. Okay, recognition, constitutional recognition. Somebody should say within the Australian Constitutional that because the British Empire showed up and claimed the continent of Australia, they should recognise that the continent was already occupied. The idea that Australia was, quote, terra nullius, that's absolute bullshit. And the Australian Federal High Court, which is the highest court in Australia, like in the States, our courts go from the local court to the district court to the state Supreme Court, and then we go to the federal court, and the federal court has the High Court. So when the High Court of Australia says that's fucking it, it's as high as it gets, unless you appeal to the House of Lords in England. Right? Now, my mother's grandfather's will was actually literally fucking well appealed to the House of Lords in England. But as an Australian, as a kangaroo feeder, as a ratepayer on 100 acres of endangered species sanctuary, I don't give a flying fuck as to what the House of Lords in England says. Really, truly, I do not. Howsoever, as I sit here occupying 100 acres. Now, an acre is 66 feet by 660 feet. That's one spear throw against one arrow shot. 66 feet by 660 feet. 20 yards by 200 yards. A cricket pitch by 10 cricket pitches. That's what 1 acre is. I am, by my consent, personally, willingly, after having paid for it, I am responsible for the lives, the ability to sustain themselves of everything living within the boundaries of my title deed. Truly, when I looked at it, I don't own the airspace rights, right? There used to be a fat woman in England, but now there's a big-eared Charlie. And if big-eared Charlie decides that they want to fly their fucking militarized hairy-go planes through the air above my land, they are fully entitled to do it. I am not at all whatsoever entitled to dispute their passage, nor to dispute the passage of any hairy-go plane which they might care to license to fly over my head. When I buy the title deed to 100 acres, it cost me $40,000, $400 an acre, 33 years ago. I did not buy the mineral rights. That's a totally fucking different document. I did not buy the water rights. All right? I don't own the right to drill and look for water. All those are different pieces of paper. If I want to mine it, if I want to drill it and extract water, they're all different pieces of paper. I have to pay different government departments. All I bought when I purchased the title deed to 100 acres of the skin of planet Earth, what I bought was the personal responsibility for not fucking up the sustainability of the lifestyle of everything alive within the boundaries of the land I purchased responsibility for. Okay, there's a lot of people who would say that I'm a knucking fat case, right? Which is, it's a spoonerism for a fucking nutcase, for even wanting to consider such an idea. But think about it. If I purchase the right to do whatever it takes to make a profit on 100 acres of the skin of planet Earth, should I not go and consult the people who've been living here for 40,000 years before my ancestors showed up? And if not, why not? Just think about this. 40,000 years ago, during an ice age, there was a land bridge from Papua New Guinea to Australia. 40,000 years ago, people migrated to Australia. It took them 1,000 years to go all the way around the outside of Australia, and after they settled the outside edge, it took them another 1,000 years to settle the interior, and those developed into 500 different language groups across the continent of Australia 40,000 years ago. And then after that, 2 ice ages came and went. And according to the archaeological carbon dated records, the DNA analyses of ancient burials cross-referenced with the hair samples collected by the air-quoted Christian missionaries from 1832 to 1972, what they call Project DNA Nation firmly established and proved that for 40,000 years, the people who showed up and settled the outside edge and the inside of Australia did not move. 2 ice ages came and went, and the Australian Aborigines stayed on their land. It was not until the Sheep and Potato Brigade arrived 250 years odd ago that the Australian cultural, traditional, sustainable way of life was disturbed. And here I am. I'm what they call an old local. They call me that because my father was born in 1909, and he went to the same primary school I went to, and he and I went to the same primary school, infant school, kindergarten, high school that my elder siblings, I have 2 sisters and I have 1 brother, right? Let me see, they were born 1939, 1941, 1956, I think. Yeah? Something like that. But yeah, we all went to the same kindergarten. My father's father, he went through this area until he was 14, travelling with his father, who was a teacher after having been a preacher from 1879 when he came to Australia, 1882 when he came to the New England. Yeah, 1882 was the first time my father's grandfather is documented to have been a Wesleyan preacher, a lay preacher, able to marry people, even though he hadn't finished his lay preacherhood. Yeah, he was enabled to solemnize marriages. Yeah, 1882. It's now 2023. So, like 131 years after my great great grandfather showed up here, I'm still living here. And I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, my big brother, he's 20 years older than me, he came up here for a spontaneous visit, and he happened to mention that when he was a kid, back in the 1940s and 50s, before his mother died, and she died in 1958, our grandfather used to bring him up here, literally right here where I'm living, on this spot where my hut is. Anytime there'd been a lightning strike and a fire showing from Glen Innes, and they'd come up here and collect charcoal from the half-burnt trees for for our grandfather's blacksmith forge at Wharton's Garage. So here I am living on my grandfather's charcoal mine, and I bought it absolutely unknowing. Lived on it for like 20 years or something, 10 years, 15 years, before my brother ever showed up and told me about it. Brady bunches. Shit, oh dear, you get that. Okay, so here I am. I've been raised as a white man. My father was a businessman, the son of a wheelwright woodsman who bought the blacksmith shop at the end of World War One. It's entirely fair to say that I grew up as, air quotes, the protected species. I was a white male from the upper middle class in a small country town in New South Wales. And for some reason, my father had a really low opinion of British Imperial Australian governmental administration of the Aborigines. He didn't like it, but his idea was that it was the best out of all the available options. And I didn't understand it. And in 1967, I was 6 years old. I can remember vividly my mother, who was a school teacher, or she was a tech teacher working for the primary school. So all of her friends were primary school teachers, and they used to come to our house for progressive dinners, as they called them. So as the only child of the town's odd couple, like the skinny little old man and the fat young woman school teacher, I used to get to sit at the table and I'd hear them. And I heard my father telling the school teachers, who all said, oh, you have to vote yes in the 1969 referendum. You must vote yes, otherwise you're a racist piece of shit. Or words to that effect. I heard them say more or less that to my father. And I heard my father say, the only thing that's keeping the Australian Aborigines culture together is the fact that they cannot buy alcohol on demand. While ever they are not able to access unemployment benefits, while ever they are not able to access or to purchase alcohol, then they have to live on their tribal land working as stockmen or household servants for the white people who have stolen their land. And as nefarious and horrible as that is, it means that the Aborigines, the survivors thereof, the ones who used to live there, their descendants are still living on their land. And because they're not being paid, quote, award wages, therefore, when it becomes time for them to follow the dreaming track and go somewhere else, they can go. Because all that means is that the squattercrat who's raising moo cows or bar lambs on their traditional land, he can't rely on them for the muster or the shearing or whatever the fuck he wanted to get them to do for him so he could make money. And in the end result, up until 1966, the remnants of the Australian Aboriginal culture were able to remain on their land, even if it was privately owned. But as my father said in 1966, 1967, if they vote for Aborigines to be full citizens, then Part 1, Line 1, they're entitled to buy alcohol at any licensed alcohol retailer. Part 2, they have to be paid full wages equivalent to white Australian workers. And as a result of that, all the fucking school teachers turned out to be wrong, and my father turned out to be right, because the Aborigines who used to live on their traditional homelands, working for rations or fucking whatever you want to say it, I really don't give two knobs of goat manure to the compost heap for what the financial evaluation of their wages was. The Aborigines who traditionally owned the land were still living on the land until 1967. And after that, they got shit canned. I well remember being 6 years old, my father coming home and being really fucking upset because one of the Aborigines who used to work on Farrakabad Station, after the referendum, stood in the centre of the road and wanted my father to take a money order to the bottle shop in town to send a taxi full of alcohol back out to the rented house halfway between the town boundary and the sheep farm on which he used to be employed. My father told him no. That was in the morning. I heard it at lunchtime. By sundown, what my father had to say was somebody told him about postage stamps and envelopes. And my father, he had the contract to deliver the mail along the Farrakhabad Road. So Mr. Cutmore, father of several of my friends, he was standing in the middle of the road throwing rocks at my father's school bus to force my father to stop. And then he said to my father, "Here, take this to town." And he passed on to him an envelope with a stamp on it and the address of the local bottle shop. And the fat lady in England, Queen Elizabeth II, she paid my father to carry the Aborigines, the family, the head of the family, to carry his booze order to town and put it into the post office where some white person got paid to stamp it and some other white person got paid to deliver it to the bottle shop where some white person got paid to not only put the check into the bank where some white person got paid to process it, but they also got paid to put all of the booze into the taxi where a white man got paid to take it out there to the Aboriginal family to make sure that old man Cutmore got as pissed as a Newton, beat the fucking shit out of his family and abused them and made sure that they grew up to never function properly within white society. And now in 2023, we're gonna have a referendum, DUMB, to see whether the fucking oil, the colonists, the people who travel halfway across the world to empty their fucking colon all over everything they fail to understand, whether the colonialists dare to care to allow the Aborigines, the Indigenous, the traditional owners of the land, the people who fucking lived here sustainably for 40,000 years, maybe 65,000 years, depends on your archaeological references, allowing them to have a voice to Parliament. And there's a fucking debate among the dim damn dumb fucks, all 25 million of them, with whom I share this fucking continent. How dare you! How dare you fucking dispute it! When I first went to talk, to ask the local tribal elders if it would be acceptable to them for me to carve and paint and fly and sell boomerangs, they said, "Why do you want to know? Why would you ask us?" And I said, "Well, it's like boomerangs are your cultural heritage. I was raised to be a white man. If I want to make and paint and carve boomerangs. I feel like I'm encroaching upon your cultural heritage, and I'd like you to tell me whether it's okay. And the tribal elders said, um, golly gosh, not many white fellas ever asked us that. Put it this way, if you can explain Aboriginal technology to the white fellas, that would have to be a really big improvement. Go your hardest, get into it. Okay, so here we are, and we're looking at this business of a debate regarding the voice. And here's what I would like to say. Why don't we consider one recognition? The Mabo decision recognized that, quote, terra nullius was absolute fucking bullshit. So everything that's derived from terra nullius, chuck it aside, throw it to the shit house, right? Put it down the long drop and crap on top of everything that ever derived from terra nullius. Yeah? Okay. So then, after recognition of the fact that Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders were the traditional owners of this continent and their islands, and therefore, thus and because they own the rights to all the land and all the sea and everything you can take off this. You have to accept that. That's what the defeat of terra nullius by the Mabo decision means. Recognition. Now we need a treaty. A man called James Cook was sent by King George III to go and take a bunch of fucking astronomers to Tahiti to see if they could have a look and see whether Vulcan would be confirmed as a planet inside the orbit of Venus. And they failed to do that. On their way home, they were tasked with looking for Terra Australis. They found New Zealand, Kiwi land, Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, all the way from fucking Hawaii to Tahiti to Aotearoa, New Zealand. The people they captured and took were able to speak to the natives. They took people from New Zealand, Aotearoa, to Australia, and they couldn't fucking talk to anyone. Okay, discontinuity here. I've just gone outside for a pee and fed a possum, and like my train of thought has been a bit disturbed. But I think the next thing I wanted to say is that life on the Australian continent was deeply disturbed by the discontinuity of British imperial colonialism. Now, a colon, what that is a long, narrow, muscular tube lined with a mucous membrane full of shit. And colonism or colonization with a hyphen, what that consists of is traveling a really, really, really long way away from home, ideally halfway around the fucking circumference of the earth. And when you get there, you empty your colon, you shit all over whatever it is that you don't understand. And that's what happened here in Australia. 35 years ago, a tribal elder of the local Aborigines said to me, he said, we don't understand why it is that Biome allowed white people to come to Australia. Everything they've touched, they've turned to shit. They've fed the local native wild food plants to their livestock. They cut down the forest, they shut off the rainfall, they eroded the land, they filled the rivers with silt, they caught all the fish, they killed all the prey animals. Everything they have touched, they have fucked. If they're still here in another 200 years, they'll all be dead. If they keep going along the same track, they're headed down. So therefore, thus and because, the task confronting Australia's Aborigines, the indigenous people, the original traditional owners of the land, what we have to do is keep our culture alive until the white pricks have killed themselves, have become extinct by fucking the environment and trashing the biosphere and killing everything, killing the ecology, killing everything that they require with which to live here. Now, that's what I was told 25, 30 years ago when I went to the local land council and I said, pretty please, is it okay if I, as a propeller carver, as some who's flown behind something I've carved, can I make cross boomerangs with a wing nut in the middle out of straight bits of wood, chainsaw milled? Is it okay if I do that? And they said, if you can explain Aboriginal technology to the white people, that would have to be an improvement. Yeah? And that was like 30 years ago. I have personally made and sold, as well as tested rigorously, something like 60 cross boomerangs, as well. See, there's another one. There's a whole bunch of bent wooden boomerangs, copied from the one my father bought in 1928 from an old Aboriginal man on the side of the road at Yamba. Think about it. It's only 95 years old. Why would anybody expect me to give a shit about Aboriginal culture? Eh? What? Right. So, there we go, and now we know. I have kind of a different attitude to this whole idea of recognition, treaty, voice, and rent, perhaps compared to most of the people who live in Australia. My earliest white ancestor is my mother's grandfather. He came to Australia from Ireland in 1850. My father's father's father came to Australia in 1879. I'm what they call an old local. I went to the same kindergarten that my father went to, the same kindergarten that my brother and sisters went to, the same kindergarten my children went to. Yeah? Maybe 50% of my hometown is also old local in that they went to the same kindergarten their parents went to. I got to say, most of Australia is not that way organised. Now, as a white man, raised as a white man, I've experienced the benefits of such a system. In 1958, my father did a favour for a bloke called Willie Struve, gave him a job as a mechanic. 6 months later, Willie Struve backed out about the same time Dad's first wife died. It was a bit inconvenient. A year or two later, when my mother was pregnant with me, Willie Struve turned up at the back door and he said, "Pretty please, can I buy the electrical test bench you made in 1928? And my dad said, "No, I won't sell it to you. I'll give it to you, but you have to clean out the armature winding and generator repair room at Wharton's garage." So Willie Struve did that. That was in 1958 and 1960. I was born in 1961. When my son, who was born when I was 28, when he was 17, I went and I had a talk to the son of the man who was Willie Struve's apprentice. And Willie Struve had sold his business to his apprentice, and Willie Struve's apprentice sold his business to his son, and Willie Struve's apprentice's apprentice took my son on as an apprentice. And when my son was 25 and he'd finished his apprenticeship 2 years earlier, Willie Struve's apprentice's apprentice sold the business to my son. That's what you call old local effect. I called in a favour my father did for a man 2 years before I was conceived. Right? And as I say to people, if that's how I perceive old local effect, and I've only really been here since 1882, how do you imagine an actual Aborigine feels living here on Australia, watching all us immigrants shit all over everything? 40,000 years of their ancestors have built up for them to live within. Think about that. Think about it. To me, living on 100 acres of endangered species sanctuary atop a ridge in a fucking regrowth forest where it took me 30 years to find the curved edge stone spokeshave with two different radii on either side of the basalt spokeshave for making smooth didgeridoos out of the hollow trees that grow here. It took me 30 bloody years as a white man paying attention before I bloody noticed the stone tools that had been left here by the people who used to live here after 30 bloody years of saying, oh, gee, that could have been a didgeridoo. That would have been a good didgeridoo. That would have been a good didgeridoo. Finally, I noticed and I found the stone tools during that drought. Like, I'm one of the more switched on white fellas, and it's faintly possible I may be a little bit of a black fella. Like maybe my mother's father was 1/8 or 1/16 Aborigine, quote, passing for white. Don't know. I would have to get a DNA test to find out. I have a cousin who agrees with me. I have another two cousins who don't agree with me. We're all descended from the same man. And apparently, you can't get tested for Aboriginality via DNA. It shows up as fucking Polynesian. Fuck you! Science. Sometimes science really gives me the shits because it's kind of, sort of, obviously biased in favour of Europeans. Now, peon once was a Spanish word. Still means a peasant lower than a turd. And Euro means from Europe comes. A landless, ignorant peasant from Europe comes. That's what European means. Anybody who thinks that European practices mean world's best practices, yeah, they got their head so far up their fucking ass they need a snorkel to breathe. Right? And it was Nazi submariners who invented the snorkel. A way of breathing when your head is inserted so far up past your fucking rectal sphincter that there's no other way to access oxygen. And so, let us discuss this business of a voice to Parliament. Now, a Parliament, that's kind of like a linguistic degeneration of, quote, a parley, P-A-R-L-E-Y, new word, O apostrophe, which is short for of, men, M-E-N, T apostrophe, T apostrophe, which is short for two, bracket, decide. Parliament means a parley of men to decide. That's what a parliament means. So we have a referendum which requires 60% agreement among a majority of states in the country of Australia in order to pass a parley of men to decide if it is appropriate for the traditional, original, indigenous land owners, the people who've been here for 65,000 years, the people who know how this continent operates, to have any voice at all whatsoever to Parliament. That's what's being debated. That's what's goanna be voted upon. And here's my thoughts on that. Any and every individual person, every individual who wants to think that the traditional, original, indigenous owners of Australia should have no voice to Parliament with which to pass any opinion on any development which the post-colonial, neo-imperial, white fellas, immigrant government wants to implement. Anybody who says the indigenous people should have no right to have a voice to Parliament, so that the elected representatives should be able to at least consider what the traditional indigenous people have to say regarding any and every proposed development. Anyone who opposes that, they're pretty much in the same boat as a dim, damn, dumb prick by the name of Barney Baby Joyce, who happens to be my personal federal elected member of Parliament, a parley of men to decide. And my personal federal member of Parliament, he's such a fucking idiot that his opinion is that, and I'm quoting here, why would you pay any attention to the environmental scientists? Because if you pay any attention to environmental science, then you would never get anything ever built or done in Australia. Unquote. That's what Barnaby Joyce said to camera during an interview when he was Australia's Minister for Water and Energy and Resources. All right? Barnaby Joyce is deeply upset at the idea that blackfellas should ever get a voice to Parliament. Peter Dutton, who used to be, once upon a time, the deputy leader of the Liberal Party. He's now the leader of the Liberal Party. Peter Dutton, the man who looks like fucking Voldemort, and Barney Baby Joyce, who abandoned his 3 daughters and his wife so he could go and fuck his painted secretary. They're the sort of arseholes. They're the caliber of pieces of shit on legs who think that you should vote against a voice to Parliament for the Aborigines. Because why the fuck would any white cunt want to have to fucking deal with a blackfella telling Parliament why it's a dim, damn, dumb, stupid fucking shit of an idea to greenlight whatever fucking profit-making development the white cunt wants to impose upon the Australian landscape. What industrial imperial development has Europe ever imposed on Australia, which ever made Australia better for Australians? Not a single fucking one. Personally, if you have a single fucking skerrick of moral, ethical, personal responsibility for your life, if you live in Australia, I say you have a zero alternative but to vote for an Australian recognition of Aboriginal ownership, for an Australian governmental treaty with Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders, for a voice to Parliament, and for a payment of rent. A payment of rent equivalent to at least a per capita percentage of GDP from all of Australia, whatever the fuck Australia makes from economic activity upon the Australian continent, a per capita percent, which is something like 2% currently, should be turned over annually without question to the Australian Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders as rent on the quote unimproved unquote value of the entire fucking continent, because that is what 25 million motherfucking Australian white cunts and immigrants are sucking their lifestyles out of. And as for me, myself, on the one hand, I've spent more than half my life paying rates to the local council on 100 acres of endangered species sanctuary and feeding kangaroos, swamp wallabies, 5 species of birds, biscuits and bread from out of my disability pension for being fucked in the head, for having a bad back and a sore foot, but mainly for the short circuit which causes me to tell the truth in public places. And okay, hopefully my daughter will build herself a house on the 100 acres of endangered species sanctuary I have managed to fucking carve out of the destruction that white Australian civilization has done unto Australia. And with a little bit of luck, maybe, perhaps, possibly, piss-a-bubbly, my offspring might get to fucking live in a bit of Australia which still works. I don't know. I'm fucking 62. I've survived mouth cancer. I've lost my teeth. I've had my head irradiated. My daughter has a fucking tent in my front yard, a flat pack shed that might turn into a house, and with bloody good luck, she might get to be able to have enough money to pay somebody to build it for her, to live within. And then, if she can find somebody to bloody well father a kid for her, I might get to see a grandkid. Who the fuck knows? Compared to all the other white fellas of my ilk, my age, my generation, I'm probably not doing too bad. But you know what? I'm really seriously fucking worried as to what the hell is going to happen with this referendum. Because evil-minded, scurrilous fucking scumbags like Peter Dutton, the individual miserable prick who's currently in charge of the quote liberal unquote party, right, which was always a fucking joke, right? The only liberality which that party gives a shit about is the liberality to trash the environment and shit all over the workers. And Peter Dutton, he personally used to be a member of the Queensland Police farce back in the days when the Queensland Police death in custody was the highest in the entire British Commonwealth of Nations. And then Peter Dutton left the police farce of Queensland and he joined the Liberal Party of Queensland. And yeah, now he's the fucking pathetic piece of shit who looks like Voldemort that came after bloody Scott Morrison. Golly gosh. Gee darn shucks. So, now, in conclusion, here's what I would like to suggest. My personal opinion as to what Australia should do is that on the one hand, we should green light get up there, you bastard. We should green light constitutional recognition. We should green light a voice. We should sign a treaty. And we, as Australians, as a ratepayer, I should be paying rent to the traditional owners of this land. 20 odd years ago, maybe 100 miles northeast of here, I was talking to some traditional owners and their names were Kath and Eric Walker. Sorry if that upsets you. But what they said to me was, as long as I tried to do something every year to, quote, pay the rent on the land I was occupying as a white man, then they were happy with that. Now, excusez-moi, at the time, I was poet in residence for the Environment Centre at Armidale, and they had signed paperwork with the people who wanted to mine Kimbara Mountain. And both of them were kind of sort of coming under public scrutiny and being criticised. All I can say is my poem was published, the mine shut down. Both Eric and Una stopped being active. I don't know whether they were on the wrong side and I was on the right side. Who bloody knows? But the thing is, Una Walker said to me that I should pay the rent. I should do something to pay the rent. All right? They might have been wrong. I might have been right. But underlying it, what she said was if I wanted to live on Aboriginal land and not feel like a freeloader, I should do something to try to pay the rent. So here's what I think. I think I should be paying because Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders are roughly 2% of the Australian population. I should be paying 2%. I should be paying a per capita percentage of my pension as a rent to Aboriginal Australia. I think Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders should be offered a per capita percentage of Australia's GDP because Australia manufactures, creates, sells, racks up, however you want to fucking quantificate it. Australia makes all of its GDP, gross domestic product, from the land stolen at gunpoint with poison, with biological warfare from the indigenous people of Australia. And in 250 years, everything Europeans have done to Australia was done for the benefit of European markets, European market demand, and it was always done at the detriment of Australian sustainability. Therefore, thus and because I say unto you that anybody and everybody who chooses to vote against recognition, treaty, voice, and rent, what they want to do is to silence the people who fucking know what they're talking about. It's like when Barnaby Joyce, my personal local member of parliament on a federal scale, when he was the Minister for Water and the Minister for the Environment, God, what a fuck up that was. When Barnaby Joyce, when he said that, and I'm quoting, this is what he said on camera when questioned, what Barney Baby Joyce, the little brother of the bloke who used to pay me 20 cents per day so he could take my place, kneeling down in front of the priest at 6 o'clock Mass at De La Salle College, Armidale. Because I went to school with Barney Baby Joyce's big brother, Christopher. Yeah? So I fucking know. Barney Baby Joyce. His idea, his theory, his hypothesis is that just bracket, defiably, close bracket, like Peter Dutton and all the other liberal, national, white, supremacist racists, they don't fucking want to know anything at all whatsoever about anything that the Aborigines, anything that the indigenous peoples might care to suggest about how to live in Australia. Because if Aborigines, if indigenous peoples are permitted to have any kind of a voice to Parliament, then holy shit, they might say that what the white industrial economic interests are proposing is a bad idea, will degrade the environment and will reduce any kind of harvestability or profitability from the environment. It's as if the, quote, vested interests don't want to know about any kind of actual scientific opinion. Perhaps it's a bit like when Barnaby Joyce was talking to the cameras when he was asked what he thought about the environmental scientist's opinion regarding the amount of water he wanted to pump out of the inland rivers of Australia. And what Barnaby Joyce said, what my local member of parliament on a federal level said, back in the days when he was in charge of everything, what he said was, don't you go worrying about what the environmental scientists say, because if ever you listen to the environmental science, then you wouldn't get anything done or built in Australia. Unquote. So it's kind of official. The policy of the Liberal National Party is to fucking ignore all the science. Everything put together for the last 150 years by white fellas, as well as everything put together over the last 40 to 65,000 years by black fellas. Because if it's science, who the fuck wants to know? What matters here in Australia is who the fuck can make profits out of it. Who the fuck can sell this shit to the Chinamans. That's what the fucking Liberal National Party gives a shit about. And all they want to do is suppress everything which the traditional owners know about Australia from ever becoming public knowledge. Because that's what the fucking fake liberals And that's what fucking Menzies always created the name of their party to be: a fake, a lie. Liberal is not what fucking conservative means, but well, was he a dim damn dumb shit? Maybe he was a clever, cunning, arsehole, rat think piece of turd. Menzies branded the Australian Conservative Party of bosses and investors as being, quote, liberal. So, yeah, there you go. That's what I fucking think about recognition, treaty, voice, and rent. I should be paying rent. I should be paying rent on the Aboriginal land which I occupy. And every other fucking Australian should also be paying rent. And the Australian economy should be paying a per capita percent as rent to the indigenous remnant of the people who used to look after this place before my ancestors fucked everything they touched while trying to make a profit for the markets of Europe. And if you can't see that, well, I'm really sorry. It's a sad thing that you're such a dim, damn, dumb cunt. Fuck you! Such is life. Have a good one. Take it easy. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.